Two Girls for Every Boy is the 9th episode of the 8th season of Cheers. This is directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. One point that I do want to mention, though, before we go any further, is that this is actually Al's last episode. Al played by Al Rosen, of course, and he doesn't have a key role to play in this episode. And the actor passed away a year later. I'm going to assume they didn't know that this was going to be his last episode, as I feel like they would have maybe done a little bit more with the character. There are times when the character has some pretty funny things to say, and I think they would have maybe made use of that a little bit more. He's just sitting at the bar in this, so it's unfortunate and quite emotional that it's his last episode. I feel like had they known, they maybe would have given the character maybe a bit of a better send-off. Now I will go through everything else in chronological order, and it starts off with Frasier coming into the bar, and he and Lilith are having their first day out away from the baby, and they've hired an au pair. Norm asks if Lilith has a problem with this young, attractive au pair being around the house, and Lilith comes into the bar with the au pair. It's a male, and I like that. I like the fact that they're showing, hey, au pairs can be males, so I don't think that's the message they were going for, but I thought it worked quite well. Sam then forgot to shave, because he'd been on a date and he didn't have enough time, and Rebecca had basically tried to tell him, no, you did this on purpose because you think it looks sexy. And as if out of nowhere, Sam just produces this mirror. He has a handheld mirror behind the bar that he often looks at, but the way Ted Danson just kind of grabbed onto it from the bar, looked in it, and just slid it back. It was just so sleek and so smooth. They didn't make a big song and dance about it, and that made it all the more funny. And the guys then decide to have a beard growing competition, and this gives us a lot of great moments, and I'll talk about those as we get there. Woody and Kelly then come in. Kelly leaves quite quickly. She has to return the car to her father, but she does get to see Norm licking the cheese doodle dust from his face first, and then there's a phone call for Woody. And Woody's obviously there as a customer with Kelly at the end of his date, and the phone rings and Sam tells him it's for him, and Woody says to him, I'm the customer, you bring the phone to me. To which Sam responds, in that case, I'm going to charge you $2 for that ginger ale. And Woody leaps over the bar, not for the first time, but it's so smooth, it's so wonderfully done, so funny. And it turns out Woody got the lead in the play for the theatre that he does. And we learn that one of the characters in the play is a character called Emily, played by an actor called Emily, who is played by somebody pretty awesome. I'll talk about that in a moment, though it's probably going to be in the thumbnail for this discussion, so it's probably very obvious who this is if you're unaware. And I rather like that. I feel like maybe it wasn't intentional, but I feel like the fact that the character is played by a person with the same name was just a little nod to the fact that Woody is played by Woody Harrelson, which was not intentional. The character was already called Woody, and maybe it was just a lucky sign. Had Woody Harrelson had a different name, or had Woody been called something different, I think Harrelson still would have got the role, but it's a nice little coincidence. And Woody, really excited, asks, who wants to help me paint the town? And everybody follows him out the bar, or they're heading out the bar because they think he means going out and getting drunk. No, he actually meant painting the town. He's going to paint the town set for the play, which I rather liked. And then we cut to some time later. The guys have much fuller beards, and Frasier is imagining himself as Freud, which I quite liked. Norm comes in scratching. And then Cliff comes in with some fuzz on his face. Norm screams Wolfman. And then Rebecca comes out of her office and she does the Wolfman gag. Funny in itself, but I also really liked it because it's showing that she's one of the gang. She is taking part in this beard competition, not as enthusiastically as Carla, but she's definitely interested in it. And it's just always nice to see that it's not just Rebecca versus everybody else at the bar. There are times when we do have that bit of distance, more so when she first joined, of course, but even with recent episodes, it sometimes can feel like, well, obviously, she's the boss, they're the employees and the customers, there needs to be some distance, but then we have moments like this where she's just on the same level as everybody else. She just wants to have a good time and be friends with people, and it is not different to the way it was with Diane, but the reception to the character from everybody else was certainly very, very different. So it's very nice to see Rebecca joining in and having fun. And we then cut to Woody and Lisa Kudrow. Lisa Kudrow is playing Emily, which makes me very, very happy. And unfortunately, Woody is having issues with the love scenes, and they decide to get on their ladders and improvise. Emily suggests improvising to just see what their characters might be feeling in the moment and get in touch with their characters more. And she really starts to come on to him. Obviously, this is Emily coming on to Woody's character, but it also kind of seems like Emily, the actor, is doing this as well. Emily, the real character behind the character. And Woody, terrified by this, climbs right up his ladder and ends up climbing up the rope that's above him, which seems quite dramatic, but he was definitely very scared in that moment. And we cut back to the bar. Woody's telling everybody this, and we learn that he hasn't actually told Kelly he's in a play yet. And he's very nervous about this. And then we have what is now quite an awkward moment with Frasier, because Frasier is remembering fondly how he once performed in shows when he was at school, but his father, the scientist who was always wrapped up in his experiments, wanted him to go into psychology, and Frasier didn't buy everything his father said, but unfortunately his father died before Frasier realised that actually his father was right, and he never got the chance to tell him that. In itself, absolutely fine. But obviously it's very awkward because, as we learn later on with Frasier, the TV show, not only is his father very much alive, played by the wonderful John Mahoney, he's called Martin Crane, but he was never a scientist. He was a detective and very good at his job, as far as we know. He wasn't wrapped up in his experiments, and he never necessarily encouraged Frasier to go into psychology. Definitely seems like this was something Frasier was more interested in on his own. So basically everything Frasier said is a complete lie, but we only know that with the benefit of hindsight. Cliff then comes in with a better beard than he had before, and it's time for the tests. And I have to admit, I felt a little sick when we start the first test, because it's the beer absorption test. And Carla dunks out a whole load of beer onto the bar, and the guys all dunk their faces into it, and it's absolutely gross. I don't mind beards in general. I don't like beer. I don't know if I must have tasted beer at one point, but it smells horrible. I'm not a beer person, and I don't really like long, scraggly beards. So just combining the two, not a fan, but it's very funny to see all of them just wiggling their faces into the beer-soaked bar. It was definitely disgusting, but very, very entertaining. Emily then comes in, and she confirms that she wasn't actually coming on to Woody. It was just method acting. And meanwhile, Carla is throwing balls at Frasier's face, and Woody and Emily decide to go to the back room to rehearse. And just as they're kissing for part of the rehearsal, Kelly walks in, and it was quite dramatic, actually. It was definitely a little dramatic. And she tells him, it's obvious what's going on. You're in a play, which I don't think is the direction anybody could have guessed it was going in. And Woody chases after her, of course, while Carla is busy counting Sam's beard hairs. And at the entrance of the bar, Woody and I apologise, by the way, if you can hear some very strange noises in the background. I don't know if the audio is picking up, but my cat has the cone of shame on from surgery, and I've had to stop this recording several times because she keeps, as she's doing now, she keeps scratching it, thinking she's scratching herself, and then she keeps hitting it off of tables and walls because she's an absolute idiot. I love her more than anything, but she's not the brightest at times, so I apologise if you can hear any strange noises. I've tried to stop and start, but sometimes she'll do a little scratch just to torment me in the background. Back to Cheers. As I was saying, I can't remember what I was saying. I've lost my train of thought. Yes, at the bar, at the entrance to the bar, Woody's getting really frustrated because he can say I love you to the air and to Kumse, but he can't say it to Emily. And Emily tells him that if he doesn't work this out, they're going to replace him. And he's able to say I love you to Emily. And it turns out, as he says, so that's the secret to acting. Fear. Which I quite liked. And I think there's truth in that. I'm not an actor, but I'm a writer, but I think anybody who has any kind of career or passion, often the fear of not succeeding is as big a motivation as the passion itself. So I think there was definitely some truth in that. And then it's time for the winner of the beard competition. And the winner is Cliff Clavin, which I wasn't expecting. Okay, it's probably not that funny, but I've just read the next bit in my notes. Cliff said when his name was announced, he said, "Now we know that it's not fixed." To which Carla responds, "But you should be." Needless to say, I found that to be very, very funny. And we end with Cliff on the phone to talk to somebody about industrial adhesive products, thereby confirming that it wasn't a real beard. He had stuck hair to his face with some pretty strong adhesive products. Rebecca winds up Sam a little bit, and then we end again cutting back to Cliff on the phone, and it was a nice way to end things. So needless to say, I think this is a brilliant episode of Cheers. Two Girls for Every Boy is fabulous. Lisa Kudrow, brilliant. It's really special as well because Burrows went on to direct the pilot of Friends with Lisa Kudrow, of course. Kudrow was actually originally cast as Roz in Frasier, but it didn't work out. It's not the direction they wanted for the character. I don't think it was anything against Kudrow personally. Obviously, they'd worked with her before, so I don't think that's the case. It's just the case that it wasn't quite what they were looking for the character of Roz. And I think it's fair to say that if Kudrow had played Roz, she wouldn't have played Phoebe. And everything worked out, in my opinion, absolutely perfectly. So it's quite special for multiple reasons. And the episode itself, very, very funny. I don't know if I have any personal highlights. I think just everything, absolutely everything was fabulous. Very, very funny. Carla's response to Cliff about being fixed. Yeah, I enjoyed that quite a lot. Definitely a brilliant episode. Two Girls for Every Boy is a fantastic episode of Cheers.